Hello to you, Mr. Jooste. Thank you for your time. They are yummy, but why are they so expensive suddenly?
Good morning, Gareth. Yes, I think when we look at potatoes, the first thing that we need to mention is that the prices that we refer to are those prices that are formed on our national fresh produce markets. Prices on these markets are determined by supply and demand. Now, one of the big drivers currently for the higher prices is lower supply due to a number of factors. The one is that since lockdown and due to all of the impact of the various different regulations resulted in more potatoes moving around the fresh produce market in South Africa. And if we have time, we can come back to that. The other reason is that the production region that is currently marketing their potatoes is Limpopo, the biggest one currently marketing potatoes. And they are marketing their early harvest. And that early harvest had some frost damage. So the crop coming in, over and above more potatoes moving around the markets, is also lower due to the frost damage. So if you look at year to year, the number of bags from Limpopo going across our markets is about 2 million bags less. Those are the two main drivers of our prices currently.
Okay, so this is where I was going to ask you if this is going to be an increase that's going to stay in place forever. But if we're going to use the term of supply and demand, once this cold weather and the frost has moved along and we're able to get the surplus of potato bags back up to this 2 million mark and higher, are we going to see prices of potatoes coming down? It's a fairly essential food group for many people in the country.
Yes, no, it is an essential food. I think in order to answer that particular question, one has to look at, your seasonal price trends for potatoes. So typically over a year, let's call it a normal year, prices will drop from January until around April. It will move sideways from May, June, July into August. And then it will typically start to push higher towards December. So what we saw this year is that prices actually started to increase already in June. That is the time when the early harvest of the Limpopo production region actually starts to come in. And like I mentioned earlier, that crop is a little bit lower. So essentially, this time of the year, we are normally seeing price increases. So what the future prices for the rest of the year will depend on will be largely determined by the weather outlook for the rest of the year, because the main harvest has been planted in June, July. That harvest, they've started lifting that harvest now. And what we've seen over the last week or two is that the volumes coming to the market has increased substantially if you compare it to about 3, 4, 5 weeks ago. That has resulted in an average price drop of around about 15 to 20 rand per bag. So we're moving towards the end of the year. If we get very high temperatures accompanied by a lot of rain, we might see upward pressure in prices continuing. If we have normal weather, we will follow the normal price trend. So your prices might ease somewhat towards December.
I know
it depends on the weather.
It always depends on the weather, doesn't it, when it comes to any kind of crop. Mr. Jooste, as far as the supply of potatoes, obviously we have an essentials food basket where you'll have maize, you'll have rice. Does potatoes fall into that ambit, and could you get support from government so that the consumer in the end doesn't have to pick up the extra cost, or how would that work in your world?
I think potatoes are an essential product, especially during difficult times where you're more higher priced products when consumers can't afford those. So we're talking at a fresh produce market level, we're talking about 7 rand a kg for potatoes. If you go to the retail level, it will be slightly higher, probably in the region of 12, 13 rands per kilo. But it's still comparatively, if you compare it to bread, it is comparatively affordable to our consumers. Obviously, absorbing these types of price increases becomes difficult at the retail level for consumers that are under pressure. As far as the government support is concerned, I think we know that government is not likely to support the agricultural sector in general, and they're very reluctant to intervene in price formation mechanisms, especially in a market where we see the demand and supply in a free market system determining prices. Interventions in such a free market has a lot of unintended consequences over the long run. Investments, employment of people. I mean, in South Africa, the demand and supply mechanism and the price formation is critically important for the free market to operate, and that will influence future decisions by producers as well as processors to invest in the industry.
Just one final question to you, Mr. Jooste, before I say goodbye. The answer you gave me makes perfect sense about the free markets. Just before I let you go, though, when can we start peeling back, if you excuse the pun, on the prices of potatoes? You mentioned weather. It's got to be good weather. Supply and demand has got to be there. The market has got to be there for it. Are we talking about a year from now, or could we get cheaper potatoes for our Christmas lunch?
Yeah, I think, it's very difficult to say. If we have our normal weather patterns, it's not too hot, and the farmers can lift the crop and they get normal yields and the quality is good, you might see prices moving sideways. Like I mentioned earlier, typically this time of the year, prices are on an upward trend towards December, and then next year, January, prices will typically follow, under normal circumstances, will follow a downward trend to the mid-year. So I think we need to keep our eye on the weather. If weather conditions are not extreme, we will see a normal crop, and the market will normalize.
I certainly hope so. Potato SA CEO Andre Jooste, thank you very much indeed. Might be a few less roast potatoes come this Christmas.